Thank you. Come on. Let's give the Lord a big hand clap right now. Tell him how much we love him today. God is so good. Wasn't that panel great? Oh, you may be seated. I'm sorry. Wasn't that panel great? And, ARC's been close to my heart for many years. My family was a part of helping start ARC. Greg Serraz, my cousin, and so he was a part of telling me about from a very early time. And we've seen so many churches get launched through ARC. It's a powerful ministry. And I'm just so proud of what they're doing. And Dino Rizzo has been a great friend of ours. And so it's been a privilege to watch God grow the church through this incredible organization. How many believe that, right? And it's been incredible to watch. Well, it's my honor to be here today. And we've had so many good speakers already. But I think for me, where I really wanted to get to today, and I look back at my life. I've been in the ministry probably 34 years now. And I think the greatest thing that I've learned in 34 years is how much I don't know. Because here's the thing, God is always doing something new. The Bible says his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And we can never fully get the mind of God. We can get glimpses of it because he's so far beyond what we could think or ask or imagine. But he allows us glimpses to begin to show us things that are probably things that we would not normally see, but are so important to God. As a matter of fact, sometimes the thing that's very opposite of what we think is important is not as important to God as it is to us. And when I look back, even in my life, for me, staying here on the stage, it might seem to the human condition, this is an important thing. And I'm not underlying that fact. It's a privilege. It's an honor to be a part of this. But really, the things I do off the stage, behind the scenes, where nobody sees, are the most important things I do. Because it's not about the applause of men or the applause of people. It's when you get the attention of heaven. And when you get the attention of heaven, many times most people won't see that. They'll never notice that. I want to speak to you today on invisible but invaluable. And when I look at this scripture, Matthew 6:4, it says, so that your giving may be done in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And if I could tell you one of the most important lessons that I've learned in life, it's how to learn to be invisible but invaluable. The context behind this scripture is that believers should give in order to help others, and mostly to glorify God, not to earn praise or approval from people. And when we are others and we take least notice of our good deeds and of ourselves, God takes most notice of them. And one of the biggest challenges I think a leader will face is how much glory we give to God and how much glory we take from God. So let's face it, if we're typical human beings, no matter how hard we try, we're prone to steal glory from God from time to time. We start believing that strategy actually came from us. We start thinking that sometimes we might have done this. And we forget that really, only God could have done it. It's one of the reasons why I love special needs individuals. They are so special because they're one of the few who doesn't steal God's glory. My son Connor, who has autism, he doesn't realize how God's using him around the world. He doesn't realize that millions of people have heard his story. He doesn't realize that he's been written about in books and that champions clubs are starting. And what's amazing with that is God's glory can shine on him uninhibited because he doesn't steal any glory from God. See, no matter what we do in our lives, we deal with pride, don't we? We're human. As pastors, we do it. Sometimes when we're on the stage, we crave sometimes even the attention. And you know what? When we can begin to push that glory away from us and push it to God. And when I watch special needs individuals, God told me at one time, he said, Craig, my glory is able to shine down on them because it's uninhibited. They still know glory from me. And that's the power of when we see things that most people don't see. When we see what God sees. What if I said your greatest impact as a leader is not what you do in front of a crowd, but what you do for people behind the scenes that few people see? I have the privilege a lot of times, whether speaking at Lakewood or speaking to amazing leaders like yourself, and I have that privilege, or I go around and talk about champions clubs, and it's a huge privilege, but I'm going to tell you that my most important work is not here on stage. It's not here in front of you. My most important work is when I get off the stage and there's a special needs mom or dad, they're sitting there and they've went through years of struggle as a special needs parent, and I'm able to look in their eyes and say, you're a good mother. You're a good father. I'm proud of you. Keep going. It's the most important thing that I do. Most people don't see it, but all of heaven many times will stand at attention, because when you do it in secret, God will reward openly. I know an equipment manager for a professional basketball team, and the team often arrives in the middle of the night, and he has to go to the arena sometimes at 2 a.m. And he studies each player and what they like, and he gets their lockers to their liking. He's so dedicated. And nobody sees him. And he said something so powerful, and it's when I knew he was a secure leader, because he said, I'm invisible, but I'm invaluable. Nobody sees me, but I know I matter. I'm secure enough in who I am, I can be comfortable behind the scenes. I'm content to make others look good. See, I believe the greatest leaders, and many times the greatest ones that are building people, is when you have this attitude of sowing a seed, pushing people up. And when it's your time to shine, God will make sure someone's there to push you up. But you must pass this test of being invisible. If you aren't secure enough in life to be invisible, you will struggle feeling valuable. I've seen many insecure leaders that were on stage preaching in front of a lot of people, and some of the most insecure leaders that when I sit down and talked with them, it was because they never were invisible for someone else. They never did something that nobody saw. They always were part. And again, understand, this is what we do. It's our role. I'm not putting that down in any way. This is what God's called you to do if you're a pastor and leader. It's to stand from people and speak. But remember something, you're not working unto people, you're working unto God. This verse talks about what you give in secret, God will reward you for in the open. Making your team look good. Going out of your way to help others excel. Not looking to get the credit. You've got to learn to be okay being invisible. Just remember, in heaven, you're invaluable. That person you're investing in wouldn't shine as bright without you. They may even think they did it on their own. That's okay. God sees it. God sees every seed you sow, and others may forget it, but God will never forget. See, I know there are people here today, and these are the people I love to speak to, that you feel a little invisible right now. You're working on a team. Maybe you're even a pastor. You plant a church, nobody's there, they're not around you. And man, you've questioned whether your life and your work is significant. And maybe you're not getting the applause of a lot of people. Maybe you're not staying here on stage. But just remember this, all of heaven is applauding for you right now. As a matter of fact, you're so valuable to God. And when you learn this aspect of being invisible, see, God's not just wanting you to be invisible just for the sake of it. He's getting you prepared, and he's testing you right now that if you could handle being invisible, he can make you very valuable in the kingdom. See, every one of us should be invisible in somebody's life. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the ministry. If all you do many times is speak in front of people and stuff, and you're not invisible for somebody else, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think you're missing something. See? Not looking for credit. Not announcing, hey, everybody, look at what I'm doing. But doing it quietly in humility unto God. Many people are behind the scenes today making this conference happen. And if they weren't making this happen, we wouldn't be standing here right now. And I am so thankful for all of you that made this conference happen today. Look, you may feel invisible, but you are invaluable. We could not have done this without you. You're so important. You see, their names are not on the sign. They're not standing on the stage, but they're invaluable. Their names are not on the bulletin in the church, but they are in heaven. How heaven sees things is different than how we see things. When you are helping others shine, that gets heaven's attention. When we are only making ourselves shine, we will always crave the need for attention. Zechariah says this, do not despise these humble beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And especially, I think, when it comes to roles or positions. Learn to accept the role that God has given you right now. Be proud of it. Know that God has put you in this place for this time. And whether you're speaking to 1 or you're speaking to 100, this is the most important. And when you speak to them like you're speaking to 10,000 if you're only speaking to 1. I remember when I started out in the ministry, man, my first youth group was 3 people. 3. 1 was the youth, and the other 2 was the brother and sister of the 1 youth. And man, I preached to those 3 people like I was preaching in front of 40,000 people. Because I knew that it was such a privilege that God will allow me to speak, that God will allow me to do this. I knew at times I was invisible, but I knew I was invaluable to God. I knew that if I could minister to those 3 people, take those seeds right there, that God could do something powerful and amazing. Sure enough, he did. We had a revival in that youth group, and it became the largest youth group in Southern California, and 16 ministers came out of that. If I wouldn't have felt good when I was invisible, I would have never been valuable to those kids in that area. You see, there's such power in this. Especially when we're facing different challenges. See, the challenge is if you are anointed for a role that maybe you look at a pastor or a senior pastor and you say, man, I want to be that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to go for a goal or go for something that God puts down your heart. But the challenge is if you aren't appointed for that role, it will not satisfy you anyway. The weight will be too heavy. And there's a difference between self-ambition and holy ambition. Self-ambition seeks to put the spotlight on you. Holy ambition seeks to put the spotlight on God and others. See, I love what Philippians 2, chapter 3 through 4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking in your own interests, but each of you in the interest of the others. It's one of the things I love about this art team is, man, it's not about them. They really care about you. But here's a challenge. Even good people, family and friends will look at your role. Somewhere along the line in your ministry, and they might look at your role and tell you where they think you should be. I want to encourage you with this. Be careful. We all need to be motivated, but we can motivate ourselves into the wrong position. I've seen so many leaders follow promotions and still not be happy. I've come to see that God's definition of promotion. Promotion is not a move up the ladder. It is a move toward your call. Don't let someone promote you from your calling. 1 Corinthians 7:17 says, only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned them to and to which God has called him. This is my rule in all the churches. I'll never forget, I was a senior pastor. I was a senior pastor in Seattle. I planted a church, and God had really moved in our church and really built it and stuff. And then all of a sudden, God spoke to me, and he said, Craig, He says, I want you to give up the church. I want you to turn over your associate who's a local in that area. And he says, I want you to begin to go and help kids and families. Now, I've been a youth pastor. I've been a young adult pastor. And then I became a senior pastor. Now, if you looked at it humanly speaking, it felt like I was climbing the ladder, right? Then God says, I want you to be a children's pastor. Well, God, I've never been a children's pastor before. You want me to stop being a senior pastor and be a children's pastor? And it was literally for 6 months I argued with God about that. See, it doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why would I move? But what makes sense to us may not make any sense with God, right? Because God was saying, Craig, I've seen the family broken down. I've seen them struggling. And he said, I want you to help rebuild the family. So I resigned my church. I went to Southern California and I started working with churches and leaders in the children's ministry. I'll never forget that. It was hard. I'd never done before. I couldn't tell you what scope and sequence was if my life depended upon it. I was just trying to figure out what to do, but I knew that was what God called me to do. And man, God began to move and we began to see things happen. And what was interesting was I didn't necessarily think like a children's pastor. I thought like a pastor. So many times with children's ministry, you'll have a group of leaders and they'll go around, they'll go towards that goal. Well, I thought like a pastor. So I thought, okay, we'll develop departments within the children's ministry. And we'll have a music department, a human resource department, and we'll have all these different departments and they'll serve the different ministries. Because I was thinking like a pastor. I didn't know it, but that thought process revolutionized children's ministry in America. They started thinking differently about children's ministry. Not because of me, I was just acting like a pastor. And then all of a sudden that ministry began to grow. And before you knew it, in 3 years, there were people coming from all over the world to see our ministry. And it just so happens there was this Southern speaking pastor in Houston, Texas, and they were about to go in the Compact Center. And you know what? He didn't need a senior pastor. He didn't need a young adults pastor. He needed a children's pastor, a family pastor to help him go into the Compact Center. And if I wouldn't have got over what I thought was climbing the ladder, what I thought was position or role, what I thought was important, and I let go of that and walked into how God looks at things, I would have never been taken to where God took me. And I was able to see historic things. God moving in so many powerful ways. You see, we're not here to climb the ladder. We're here to serve. Even Jesus didn't come to be served. He came to serve. And many times we don't allow him to serve because we're trying to position ourselves or move ourselves in a place or a goal. And God just saying, man, I want to pour into you. I want to show you how I want you to work within this ministry, within your life. See, God puts people in our lives so we can help them succeed, not just build our resumes. Build your resume by serving your overseer, by helping your coworkers. You know what gets me excited when I see senior pastors volunteering with their volunteers. Watch God elevate you. You don't have to have a title to have an influence. When you wake up every day and you say, my role in this day is to be my best and to make others shine, God won't ask you if you kept up with your relatives or the pastor of another church or did you have more than someone else. He'll ask you this. And whoever gives to one of these little ones in rank or influence, even a cup of cold water because he is my disciple, surely I declare to you, he shall not lose his reward. Because when you build people, God will build you. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, so encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. And God spoke to me one time. He said, Craig, you know what? I never asked you to build the ministry. He said, all I asked you to do was build people. If you build people, Craig, I'll build the ministry. If you put people first, I'll build the ministry. Craig, the church isn't the building and isn't the program and isn't the strategy. Craig, the church is people. And if you'll pour into people, I'll build your ministry. And that was revolutionary for me in my ministry, that when I stopped trying to build the ministry and make everything happen, and I started building people, I watched God begin to build the ministry unlike anything I'd ever seen before. See, Jonathan, the son of Saul, wasn't chosen as king. His best friend David was chosen instead. Jonathan was so secure that he went out of his way to help David. Now, I want you to think about this. It's kind of mind-blowing. You know, right there. He's the heir to the throne. Yet he's going out of his way to help David. He even gave him inside information and to keep him safe. Behind the scenes, Jonathan was keeping him safe. He could have thought, this guy took my spot. I'm the rightful heir. No, he knew his role in David's story was to push him forward. He knew as he helped push David towards his destiny, he was pushing himself towards his destiny. See, it's better to become who God created you to be than to try to promote yourself to become somebody you weren't created to be. See, David wasn't raised in royalty. He came from a poor family of shepherds living in the desert. Yet Jonathan took David under his wing and taught him the protocol. And behind the scenes, helping his friend David, not competing with him, people saw David shining and rise to new heights. What they didn't see is his good friend Jonathan, the king's son, who was supposed to be king, helping David shine behind the scenes. See, often we think, God, let me be a David, a hero of the faith. We should aspire to do great things. But what if I said, oh God, let me be a Jonathan and push someone in towards their destiny. Let me realize that it's okay to play a smaller role. Let me realize that it's okay to be invisible because to God I'm invaluable. Help me not to be jealous, God. When somebody else's church is growing faster than mine, when it's my time, I'll be ready. Let me be behind the scenes and help someone else look better. See, real giving occurs when you give someone something that you want to keep. True greatness is not how bright you shine. It's how bright you make others shine. Look on the other hand. Saul couldn't handle David's success. When the people saying Saul killed thousands, but David killed 10,000, Saul never looked at David the same way again. He loved David as a young man. The problem came when people said David was more talented. If you're going to reach your highest potential, you have to be happy for the people that pass you by. Can you handle being number two? Pass that test of being happy for people who rise higher. You know, sometimes it's the sovereignty of God. Favor is not fair, is it? Celebrate what God has done in somebody else's life. God blessing them doesn't mean he can't promote you. As a matter of fact, maybe it's a test that if you can celebrate somebody else that God's moving, maybe that's a test to see if you can handle what God's about to give you. See, God never runs out of favor. But if you become a Saul and get jealous, it will keep you from your destiny. God lifts up one and sets down another. Here's the key. You don't have to be a David to be fulfilled. You don't have to be a king to be happy. What you have to offer is valuable. When you keep a pure, right heart, you're passing the test, and God will take you to places you never dreamed. There's something you don't realize even about my pastor. Many people see the results, sometimes what God's done and all those types of things, but what they didn't see is for 17 years, my pastor worked behind the scenes serving his father. My pastor would get up on Saturday nights and he would lay out his dad's suits, put his shoes down so his dad looked his very best, especially in his latter years. Victoria did his hair before he went out to speak. And they served behind the scenes for 17 years. And what was amazing with Pastor Joel, he liked making his father look good. And he did his best to make his father shine. He was invisible, but he knew he was fulfilling his purpose. He wasn't thinking, I'll take over one day. Joel isn't any happier today speaking in front of thousands and millions listening than he was behind the scenes. Whew. When you're secure in what God made you, you can be content wherever you are. You don't have to promote yourself. Keep honoring God. When it's your time to be promoted, God will do it. Elisha spent time taking care of Elijah. He was comfortable being invisible. There's so much power in this. I don't know if you're going to grasp it fully now, but I want you to take this home. At one point, Elijah wanted to go away, and Elisha knew his destiny was tied to him, and he would not let Elijah go without him. And after years of Elisha being invisible, Elijah was to be taken to heaven. Now, here's the power behind it. Elisha had been faithful being invisible all those years. But when it was his time, Elisha took over and performed twice as many miracles as Elijah. Think about Jesus. Jesus was invisible behind the scenes for 30 years of his life, so God could get him prepared for 3 years of ministry. I know you may feel invisible today, but I want you to know you're invaluable to God. I know you may feel like, man, this person's getting so much more favor than I am. Just keep being faithful. Heaven sees it. If anyone else doesn't, heaven sees what you're doing right now. He sees what you went through. He sees what you put in. He has not forgotten you. As a matter of fact, when it's your time to shine, if you'll stay faithful, if you'll embrace being invisible, as a matter of fact, I would say this, you may be in a more powerful place being invisible than if God gave you everything. See, if you can't learn to be invisible, you'll never feel valuable. There's this young man named Isaac. Isaac was born. Before he was born, his family had went to the hospital and he'd been given an ultrasound. The family was talking to the doctor, and the doctor said, it looks like he has double the fingers and double his toes. And they said, I don't think he's going to have enough bone structure around his lungs to support his lungs. And they told the parents it might be a good idea to get an abortion. The parents went to their pastor and they prayed and they sit down. The pastor said, I really believe this young man, he's going to change the world. I don't know why, but I believe he's got calling on his life. And so they went ahead and they had their son Isaac. And when Isaac was born, he had enough structure around his lungs to breathe. He had 5 fingers, 5 toes on each hand and each foot. But Isaac would have a challenge the rest of his life. See, he had brittle bone syndrome, and over his life, over the next 20 years, he would have over 300 broken bones and over 30 surgeries. And Isaac would sing. He would sing all the time, but he didn't think a church would ever want him to be a worship leader or be a part. Of course, he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk, and he had all these challenges, and his body was really frail. He finally got the courage one time to go out for a talent show. And he got so scared or so afraid, he pulled out, but then a friend said, why don't you, I'll sing with you. And so they sang together, and he actually won the talent show. What was amazing with Isaac through all this time, here's the power. He was invisible to most people. See, most people with special needs, they're invisible to a lot of people. They're invisible to the church. The church has forgotten them for years. And yet now there are millions of these kids like Isaac. And the thing with Isaac is that no matter what he faced, I've never heard a kid more positive. I've never heard a kid more positive. Matter of fact, he was encouraging his parents. Nobody knew him. He was invisible. He would sing in his bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning. His parents would tell him to be quiet because he just loved to sing. So after he won that talent show, he said, I'm going to take it to the next level. And he says, I'm going to see if they'll let me lead on the worship team. So he asked them if he could lead on the worship team. And first his dad said, Isaac, man, I don't think I've ever seen somebody in a wheelchair lead worship. I'm not sure if they're going to let you. But then his father took that voice out of his head and he said, God doesn't call those that are able-bodied and those that are that people think are not. And he doesn't discriminate against that. Go for it. Isaac tried out and he made the worship team. And for years, Isaac was invisible. But one day I saw Isaac's video of him leading worship. And so it blew me away because I'd never seen a young man in a wheelchair leading worship. And he could sing. And so I asked Isaac if he would come to Lakewood and if he would lead with our worship team. And I'm telling you, he was invisible, but because he kept a good attitude, because he never complained, because he always used his gift, even when nobody saw him, heaven saw him. God saw him. And when he came out on stage at Lakewood Church leading worship, it may have been one of the most moving things that we had ever seen. He was invisible, but he was invaluable. And now millions of people have seen him sing. I want to close with this. I want you to watch Isaac, who was invisible, leading worship on stage 2 weeks ago at Lakewood Church. Watch this.